In 1894, the agricultural establishment did not merely disagree with a German chemist named Julius Hensel, they actively sought to erase him from history. His book, Bread from Stones, was not treated as a scientific treatise, but as a heresy that threatened the very foundations of a nascent empire. While the newborn chemical industry was busy seducing the world into an addiction to soluble NPK salts, a model that turns soil into a drug-dependent junkie, nature was whispering a truth that was billions of years old, waiting for someone to listen. Consider the paradox that should keep every modern agronomist awake at night. Look at the virgin forests of the Amazon or the ancient redwoods of California. These giants have stood for millennia, producing biomass on a scale that dwarfs our most intensively managed cornfields. Yet, no one trucks in bags of blue synthetic crystals to the feet of a sequoia. No corporation sprays their canopy with pesticides. How does an ecosystem sustain such explosive, disease-free abundance without the chemical drip feed? The answer is not magic, it is geology. The secret has been crushed under our feet all along. It is the lithosphere itself. It is rock dust. This is not a story about simple gardening tips. It is a crime scene investigation into how a handful of pulverized stone can outperform a century of industrial chemistry, and why the powers that control our food supply have spent decades ensuring you never learn how to use it. To understand the magnitude of the theft, we must return to the scene of the crime, Germany, in the dying light of the 19th century. The Industrial Revolution was at its peak, and humanity was intoxicated by the idea that we could outsmart nature through synthesis. In the hallowed halls of academia, Justus von Liebig was being crowned the father of fertilizer. He had successfully reduced the infinite complexity of soil biology to a crude, reductionist triad: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. This NPK theory was the gospel that launched the modern agrochemical complex. It promised that we could bypass the slow geological processes of the earth and force-feed plants with soluble salts for rapid growth. It was a seductive proposition, but it was built on a fundamental physiological error. Enter Julius Hensel, the anomaly in the data set that the establishment tried to delete. Hensel was not merely a contrarian. He was a visionary who saw the chemical solution for what it truly was: an addiction. In 1893, he published his manifesto, Bread from Stones, a text that should be mandatory reading for every human being who eats. Hensel argued that NPK fertilizers were not food but stimulants. He compared them to feeding a man nothing but whiskey to get a burst of energy. The subject appears vigorous and bloated for a moment, but his internal structure is rotting. Hensel observed that plants forced to grow with nitrogen salts developed weak cellular tissues, stretched and watery, making them the perfect target for pests and disease. Hensel's alternative was as ancient as the planet itself: stone meal. By pulverizing granite, basalt, and other primordial rocks, he recreated the mineral-rich glacial loess that had naturally fertilized the earth for eons. The results were undeniable and dangerous to the status quo. While his neighbors' chemically treated potatoes turned to black slime from blight, Hensel's crops stood pristine, robust, and virtually immune to infection. He postulated a revolutionary concept: insects and fungi are not enemies to be poisoned. They are nature's garbage collectors, programmed to destroy only the sick, chemically imbalanced plants that lack essential trace minerals. The response from the emerging chemical cartel was swift and brutal. They did not debate Hensel's science. They destroyed his reputation. The agricultural journals of the day, heavily influenced by nitrate manufacturers, launched a coordinated smear campaign, labeling his stone meal method as quackery. They knew that if farmers realized they could revitalize their land, simply by crushing the rocks beneath their feet. The entire economic model of selling patented chemicals would evaporate. The tragedy is absolute. Even Justus von Liebig, in his final years, recanted his own NPK theory, admitting he had sinned against the wisdom of the Creator by ignoring the mineral matrix of the soil. But the industrial machine was already moving too fast to stop. Liebig's confession was whispered and forgotten. Hensel's books were pushed into the shadows, and the world was steered down a path of chemical dependence from which we have yet to return. To understand why the chemical analysis of the 19th century fails to capture the true vitality of a plant, we must abandon the beaker and pick up the magnetometer. We must fast forward to the mid-20th century and examine the work of Dr. Philip Callahan, a brilliant entomologist and biophysicist who realized that agriculture had made a fatal error. It was treating the soil as a static chemical warehouse rather than a dynamic electrical system. While modern agronomy was obsessed with the periodic table of elements, Callahan was looking at the physics of energy fields. He discovered a force that had been completely ignored by the fertilizer industry, a force that dictates the difference between a living soil and dead dirt. Paramagnetism. This is not magic. This is rigorous, measurable physics. Callahan discovered that healthy, highly productive volcanic soils, like those in Hawaii or the Nile Delta, exhibited a strong paramagnetic force. Unlike ferromagnetism, which is the permanent holding force you see in a fridge magnet, paramagnetism is the ability of a substance to align temporarily with an external magnetic field, and crucially, to amplify it. Callahan realized that the Earth's soil is designed to function as a massive transceiver. The atmosphere is filled with extra-low frequency, ELF, radio waves, largely generated by lightning strikes occurring constantly around the globe, the Schumann resonance. These waves are the heartbeat of the planet, a rhythmic pulse of energy. Here lies the secret mechanism that Big Ag ignores. Volcanic rock dust, specifically basalt, is highly paramagnetic. When you mix this crushed rock into your soil, you are not just adding minerals, you are building an antenna. Millions of tiny rock particles act as receivers, capturing these cosmic radio waves and converting that electromagnetic energy into photons, tiny sparks of light energy in the infrared spectrum. This is the battery that powers the soil. This light energy is essential for the microbial life and the root systems, driving their metabolic functions. The tragedy of modern agriculture becomes terrifyingly clear when you view it through this lens. Most synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides are diamagnetic, meaning they repel magnetic fields. By drenching our farmland in these chemicals, we are effectively insulating the soil, cutting off its connection to the Earth's natural energy grid. We are wrapping the roots in a rubber suit, starving them of the electromagnetic pulse they evolved to require. The plants, cut off from this energy source, become weak and reliant on the chemical sugar rush of NPK, while the rock dust method restores the circuit, turning the soil back into a humming, energetic generator that fuels growth not just chemically, but physically. The biggest lie told by the chemical salesman is this: rocks are insoluble, therefore plants cannot eat them. If you put a rock in a glass of water, it does not dissolve. This is the simplistic logic used to dismiss rock dust for a century. But your soil is not a glass of water, it is a stomach. This is where we enter the realm of biological alchemy, a process that conventional agronomy ignores because it cannot be patented. To understand how a solid rock becomes a tomato, we must look at the rhizosphere, the microscopic war zone surrounding the plant roots. Roots are not passive straws sucking up liquid. They are aggressive miners. When a plant is hungry for calcium or magnesium, It does not wait for a farmer to pour a solution. It exudes weak organic acids, citric, malic, and carbonic acids, directly from its root tips. These acids wash over the microscopic particles of rock dust, breaking the strong chemical bonds and liberating the minerals in a liquid form exactly when the plant needs them. This is nature's just-in-time delivery system. But the plant does not work alone. This is where the clay-humus complex becomes the most important concept in your garden. Think of rock dust particles as a vast trading floor. The surface of these dust particles, once weathered by root acids and microbial digestion, becomes negatively charged. Nutrient ions like calcium, potassium, and magnesium are positively charged. They latch onto the rock and organic matter like iron filings to a magnet. This creates a massive nutrient reserve that does not leach away with the rain, unlike synthetic fertilizers, which wash into the groundwater immediately. When the plant root approaches this complex, it performs a brilliant ion exchange. It releases a single hydrogen ion, H+, a proton, into the soil. This proton knocks a nutrient cation, say a potassium ion, K+, off the rock particle and takes its place. The plant literally swaps a piece of its own waste energy for a mineral building block. This is the biological transmutation of stone into life. With soluble NPK, you are force-feeding the plant, bypassing this intelligence, causing it to bloat and weaken. With rock dust, you are stocking the pantry. The plant decides what to eat and when to eat it. It is the difference between a hospital IV drip and a gourmet meal. If the theories of Hensel and Callahan sound like science fiction to you, let us step out of the laboratory and into the mud. The evidence is not hypothetical. It is growing in the soil right now, defying every convention of modern agronomy. We look to the wind-swept highlands of Scotland, a place where the soil is notoriously poor, acidic, and thin. Here, at the Sear Center, Cameron and Moira Thompson have conducted a decades-long experiment that should have made headlines globally. On land that was classified as unfit for cultivation, they did not add a single ounce of chemical NPK. Instead, they applied glacial rock dust. The results were not just improvements, they were anomalies. The Thompsons reported vegetable yields increasing by 300% to 400%. We are talking about cabbages the size of medicine balls and carrots that taste like candy because their sugar content, measured by Brix levels, is off the charts. But the visual spectacle is secondary to the survival instinct. When a potato blight swept through the region, devastating neighboring conventional farms that were heavily sprayed with fungicides, the rock-dusted crops at the Sear Center remained untouched. The remineralized plants had cell walls so robust, fortified with silicon and calcium, that fungal spores simply could not penetrate them. Cross the ocean to Brazil, and you find the same story on a massive scale. In a tropical climate, where intense rains leach nutrients from the soil rapidly, researchers and farmers turned to rochigem, the Portuguese term for stone meal. In controlled trials with corn and sugarcane, plots treated with local basalt dust not only matched the yield of chemically fertilized plots, but sustained that fertility for years without reapplication. They discovered that while chemical fertilizers provided a quick, violent burst of growth, followed by a crash, rock dust provided a slow, steady release curve that mimicked the natural growth cycles of the rainforest. The most damning piece of evidence, however, is not in the yield, but in the food itself. We are currently living through a plague of hidden hunger. You can eat 3,000 calories a day and still be starving because the food is empty. A modern supermarket tomato is a ghost. It looks like a tomato, but it lacks the mineral density of its ancestors. Analysis shows that food grown in remineralized soil contains significantly higher levels of iron, calcium, magnesium, and zinc. This is the ultimate validation. We are not just fixing the soil to grow more. We are fixing the soil to stop the slow malnutrition of the human race. The science is settled. The only thing missing is the will to adopt it. Before you rush to the nearest quarry with a sledgehammer, you must understand that not all stone is created equal. Using the wrong geological material is the most common reason for failure, and it is the primary reason why critics dismiss this method as ineffective. You are looking for the cooled blood of the earth, volcanic basalt. This is the gold standard. Basalt is an extrusive igneous rock, meaning it was once molten lava that erupted and cooled quickly on the surface. Because of this rapid cooling, the crystals are small and unstable, making them easier for your soil biology to break down. More importantly, basalt is rich in iron and magnesium, the two elements that act as the primary antennas for the paramagnetic forces we discussed earlier. If you use sedimentary rocks like sandstone, you are wasting your time. They are merely recycled rocks that have already been weathered and stripped of their vital energy. You must also learn to distinguish between a fertilizer replacer and a simple soil conditioner. Many farmers make the mistake of using limestone or dolomite. While these are useful for adjusting the pH of acidic soil, they are chemically simple, consisting mostly of calcium and carbonate. They are one-trick ponies. They do not provide the broad spectrum of over 70 trace minerals, like cobalt, selenium, and zinc, that are found in complex silicate rocks like basalt or granite. Granite is your second best option, particularly if you need potassium, but be warned that granite contains a high percentage of quartz. Quartz is chemically inert and very hard. It does not break down easily to feed the plants, though it does help with soil aeration and structure. For the true resurrection of your soil, volcanic basalt is the blueprint. The final and most critical variable is physics, specifically the geometry of surface area. A rock the size of a golf ball may contain all the minerals in the universe, but it is chemically useless to a root hair. The timeline for that rock to decompose naturally is measured in geologic epochs, not growing seasons. To accelerate time, we must increase the surface area. You need rock dust, not gravel. The industry standard you are looking for is 200 mesh or finer. This means the particles are small enough to pass through a screen with 200 holes per linear inch, resulting in a consistency like talcum powder or flour. When you pulverize a single stone into millions of microscopic dust particles, you are exponentially increasing the surface area that soil acids and bacteria can attack. A single ton of rock dust has more surface area than an entire farm. This vast contact area is what allows the weak organic acids of the plant roots to dissolve the stone instantly, turning a geological timeline into a biological one. Do not merely sprinkle this gold onto the surface of your garden like fairy dust and expect a miracle overnight. You must engineer the reaction. If you apply raw rock dust directly to the soil, it acts as a slow-release account that pays dividends over 5 years. That is acceptable for forestry, but for the hungry farmer who needs results this season, you must activate the stone. You must pre-digest it. The most powerful reactor for this process is already sitting in your backyard, your compost pile. This is the technique Julius Hensel championed, and it solves the two greatest inefficiencies in agriculture simultaneously. When you layer rock dust into your compost heap, you are essentially cooking the stone. The intense heat of thermophilic bacteria, reaching temperatures of 60 to 70 degrees Celsius, combined with the aggressive organic acids produced during decomposition, breaks down the crystalline lattice of the rock particles rapidly. This turns the compost pile into a collation factory. where minerals are stripped from their rock prison and bound to organic molecules, becoming instantly available to plant roots. But the magic works both ways. The rock dust also saves your compost. That sharp smell of ammonia you often smell in manure piles is the sound of money leaving your farm. It is nitrogen gas escaping into the atmosphere. The microscopic particles of basalt trap this volatile nitrogen, binding it into stable ammonium compounds. You are literally fusing the mineral with the organic, creating a complete food that no synthetic chemist can replicate. For the home gardener, the ratio is simple but strict. For every cubic meter of biomass, your leaves, grass clippings, and kitchen scraps, you should incorporate approximately 10 to 20 kilograms of rock dust. Treat it like the flour in a cake. It must be mixed thoroughly, not just dusted on top as icing. If you are applying it directly to garden beds without composting, you must till it into the top few inches of the soil where the microbial life is most active. A standard therapeutic dose is roughly half a kilogram per square meter. This may sound like a heavy application, but remember, you are not adding a chemical salt that will burn the roots. You are remineralizing the Earth's crust. You are rebuilding the soil profile that has been eroded since the last ice age. Once you have applied this foundation, you do not need to repeat it next month. You have charged the battery, and it will run for years. We have arrived at the most uncomfortable question of this investigation. If the science is sound, if the physics are measurable, and if the results are superior, why is this method not the global standard? Why do agricultural universities, funded by corporate endowments, still teach the NPK gospel? The answer is not found in a soil sample. It is found in a balance sheet. Rock dust represents a catastrophic failure for the business model of modern industrial agriculture. It is an existential threat to an industry that relies on the planned obsolescence of your soil. Consider the economics of the status quo. The chemical fertilizer industry operates on a subscription model. It is soil as a service. You are required to buy their soluble salts every single season because they are water-soluble and wash away with the first heavy rain. If you stop paying, your soil crashes and your yields vanish. It is a perfect cycle of dependency. Now, contrast this with the geology of stone meal. A single, heavy application of basalt dust remains active in the soil for 3 to 5 years. It does not wash away. It becomes part of the soil structure, releasing nutrients slowly as the plants demand them. For a corporation, a customer who buys a product once every 5 years is a dead customer. This efficiency is bad for business. But the threat goes deeper than just fertilizer sales. The true profit center of Big Ag is not in growing plants, but in killing things. The pesticide and herbicide market is a multi-billion-dollar empire built entirely on the weakness of chemically forced crops. Remember the biological truth we established. Insects and diseases are nature's predators for the weak. They attack plants that have free-floating amino acids and unbalanced sugars caused by nitrogen overdose. When you remineralize the soil with rock dust, you create plants with high Brix levels and complex proteins that are literally indigestible to most insects. A healthy, mineralized plant does not need a hazmat suit of poison to survive. This is the nightmare scenario for the agrochemical giants. If farmers adopt rock dust, they do not just stop buying fertilizer. They stop buying the pesticides, the fungicides, and the herbicides. The entire revenue stream collapses. You cannot patent a rock. You cannot copyright the Earth's crust. Basalt is the most common rock on the surface of the planet. It is available in almost every country, cheap, abundant, and unbrandable. There is no intellectual property in a pile of stone dust. Therefore, there is no marketing budget to promote it, no lobbyists to push it in Washington, and no grants to study it in universities. The silence surrounding this technology is not an absence of evidence. It is a purchased silence. The industry has successfully convinced the world that the only way to feed the population is to poison the planet, while the cure lies ignored in the quarry next door. We have now reached the end of the dossier, and you are left with a decision that extends far beyond the borders of your garden bed. This is not simply a question of which fertilizer bag to buy. It is a fundamental philosophical choice about your relationship with the living world. You stand at a crossroads between two opposing realities. On one side lies the path of the Green Revolution, a misnomer for a system of chemical enslavement that treats the soil like a sterile patient on life support, kept alive only by the constant, costly intravenous drip of synthetic fluids. This path promises convenience and uniformity, but the price is a loss of autonomy, a degradation of health, and a permanent debt to the industrial complex that holds the patent on your food supply. On the other side lies the path of the forgotten pioneers, Hensel, Callahan, and the Thompsons. It is the path of geological time and biological sovereignty. This road is harder to find because there are no billboards advertising it, but it leads to true freedom. By choosing to remineralize your land with rock dust, you are not just gardening. You are engaging in an act of peaceful rebellion. You are declaring that you do not need their blue crystals or their poison sprays. You are restoring the ancient contract between the lithosphere and the biosphere, trusting in the billions of years of evolution that turned bare rock into the Garden of Eden long before a laboratory ever existed. The ultimate question is not whether rock dust works. The physics and the forests have already answered that. The question is whether you have the courage to step away from the convenience of the bottle and do the heavy lifting of nature. The next time you hold a handful of gray, nondescript dust, realize that you are holding the condensed history of the planet. It contains the spark of life waiting for a catalyst. Do not let this knowledge die in the archives again. Go to the quarry. Get the stones. Feed your soil the meal it has been starving for, and taste the difference between a product of industry and a fruit of the earth. The revolution begins in your backyard, and it begins with a stone.